water of Lake Omanoya was never blue. Even on the brightest summer day, it remained a thick, oily black, like a giant eye staring up in the center of the forest, refusing to reflect the sky. The locals never fished there. They didn't even skip stones. They knew that in Omanoya, anything that touched the surface belonged to the depths. People whispered that the lake had no bottom, that it was a hole poked into a world that should have remained hidden. Elias was a professional diver who made a living by laughing at such stories. He had spent his life exploring haunted shipwrecks and suffocating underwater caves, and he had never met a ghost that a high-powered flashlight couldn't banish. He arrived at the shore with a heavy iron boat and a pressurized diving suit that looked like an astronaut's armor. As he pushed his boat out, the silence of the woods felt heavy, like a hand pressing down on his shoulders. There were no birds singing. There were no crickets in the tall grass. Even the wind seemed to die the moment it reached the water's edge. Elias slipped into his gear, checked his oxygen levels, and rolled backward into the dark. The cold was immediate. It wasn't the normal chill of mountain lake. It was a bone-deep, aggressive freezing sensation that felt like needles pressing into his skin through his suit. As he descended, the sunlight disappeared within 10 feet, swallowed by the unnatural murk. His flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing a forest of drowned trees. Their branches were stripped of bark, bleached white and reaching out like skeletal fingers. As he sank deeper, the silence was broken by a sound that shouldn't exist underwater. It wasn't the hiss of his oxygen tank or the steady thrum of his own pulse. It was a low, rhythmic thumping, a heavy, wet sound that vibrated through his very bones. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like a massive, slow-beating heart hidden somewhere in the mud. Elias checked his depth gauge, 80 feet. According to maps, he should have hit the silted bottom by now, but his light hit nothing but an endless, yawning void. He shone the beam downward, and that's when he saw them, pale, shimmering shapes drifting the current. At first, he thought they were giant, translucent jellyfish, but as he kicked his fins to get closer, his breath hitched in his throat. They were people. Hundreds of them were suspended in the dark water, floating upright as if they were standing on invisible ground. They weren't rotting or bloated. Their skin looked like polished wax, preserved perfectly by the freezing, oxygen-free depths. Men, women, and even children in clothes from different eras. Some in modern hiking gear, others in tattered wool from a century ago. They were all looking upward, their eyes wide and glassy, their mouths locked open in a silent, eternal scream. And then Elias saw the tethers. Thin, umbilical-like cords made of a pulsating, dark purple matter stretched in their chests, trailing down into the black abyss below. They weren't just floating, they were being held. Suddenly, the thumping heart grew louder, shaking the water so hard that Elias's vision blurred. Something massive began to shift beneath the field of faces. A colossal, pale eye, large in a house, slowly opened the floor of the lake. It didn't belong to a fish or a whale. It was as if the bottom of the lake itself was alive, a single, ancient organism that had been feeding on the villages, missing for centuries. The tethers began to twitch. He watched in absolute horror as the cord started to retract, pulling the silent, waxen bodies downward. One by one, they were dragged into a massive, toothless maw that looked like a jagged tear in the earth. The water began to swirl into a violent vortex, a powerful suction that threatened to snap Elias's air hose. He scrambled for his ascent line, his heart hammering so hard he thought his ribs would crack. He climbed the rope hand over hand, feeling the cold, wet tethers of the lake floor brushing against his boots, trying to snag him. When he finally broke the surface, he scrambled onto the muddy bank, dragging his heavy gear behind him. He collapsed on the shore, gasping for air, and looked back at the lake. It was perfectly still again. No ripples, no vortex, no sign of the nightmare below. But as he pulled off his diving glove, his blood ran cold. A thin, dark bruise circled his wrist. It wasn't a bruise. It was a faint, pulsing vein of purple matter beginning to grow under his skin, reaching toward his heart. The lake hadn't let him go. It had just given him a longer leash.